Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guest on this next interview. Slovakia has announced that it will no longer block the EU's 18th sanction package against Russia, easing tensions after weeks of delay. At the same time, Bratislava has rejected a US-led initiative to coordinate weapons delivery to Ukraine, citing national and EU-level concerns. Meanwhile, a new development has surfaced in the long-running case of a murdered journalist, Ján Kuciak. And joining us now to unpack these issues is Ján Michalčák, former head of unit for countering hybrid threats from the Czech Defense Ministry. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning. Good to be with you again, Benjamin.
So a lot to unpack here. And let's first start with the situation in Slovakia. They will now allow EU's 18th package to move forward. And I think just a couple of minutes ago, they've actually announced that the EU ambassadors have approved the political framework and the 18th package will be adopted today. The Czech Prime Minister Robert Fico have been fighting the sanction on Russian energy tooth and nail and only lifted that restriction yesterday. What have changed? And, well, do you think that this is a tactical pause or do you think that there are some deal being made with the EU partners with the Slovakian Prime Minister?
A great question. Two things that I would mention. First, Robert Fico is mainly playing the card of being anti the Russian sanctions, I believe, for his domestic audience. Because as we've discussed before on this program as well, Robert Fico has been constantly pushing his mindset of pro-Russian, conspiracy theory-driven internal politics, so as to cement his popularity at home with his core voters. So I strongly believe that he's mainly motivated by this desire, that is to make sure that should there be a snap election in the near future, he would win it again because his core voters will be motivated by his pro-Russian rhetoric, which they respect as well, to go and turn up and vote. Secondly, we know from evidence presented by the Slovak government itself that Slovakia does have alternative routes of Russian energy, Russian gas. So it's not the case, as Robert Fico tries to claim, again, I believe for his domestic audience mainly, that Slovakia doesn't have a different source of energy. It does, through Hungary and through Turkey, but it still insists for its audiences that Russia should be the main energy partner, so to speak. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, and closely connected to the first one, I believe that Fico had been convinced that he would eventually cave in and agree to the sanctions package, but he had to drag it out so as to seem for his audiences at home as a tough negotiator who still wants to remain on friendly terms with Russia.
All right, and speaking of the tough negotiator stance, just this morning, Fico also posted on social media with a also very kind of tough guy kind of talk, saying that, well, the next sanction package, he's most likely going to kind of throw a wrench into it as well. Kind of, do you think that this, again, echoes what you just mentioned earlier? Perhaps this is more for domestic consumption, or do you think that the EU can expect more roadblocks if any more kind of sanction measures or any kind of anti-Russian stance is being taken?
Look, if we take a look at the history of the Russian sanctions that the EU has adopted since the beginning of the full-scale war against Ukraine, we see both Slovakia and Hungary using the sanction packages as tools in their toolboxes to push their own interests in the EU and then push for exceptions to the rules so that they eventually agree and get a benefit, primarily a financial one, for their countries. So we can expect a strategy like that to turn up again in the case of a future sanctions package. The second thing to mention also is that, of course, no one is claiming that a separate sanction package is going to force Russia to end its aggression against Ukraine. Fico is implying that no matter what we do, no matter what sanctions we agree on, Russia is going to continue its war. And he's probably right, but that's not the point. The point is that in combination, those sanctions packages, 18 or 19 of them in the near future, combined with pressure by different allies of Ukraine, be it the EU, be it the US, or other partners, that combined should ideally force Russia to at least sit down at the negotiation table, which, again, they have been refusing to do.
All right, there's also another case that I would really want to unpack here, turning to the Ján Kuciak case. Why does this murder still carry such political and social weight in Slovakia, as well as, what's the core issue here? What made the court also kind of, put this into a retrial?
A great question, a really complex one. I'm afraid we would need an hour-long episode just to cover that one, but really shortly. As you mentioned at the beginning, Ján Kuciak and his fiancée have been murdered because Kuciak was investigating possible links of known criminals to high-ranking business people and potentially even politicians in Slovakia. And that was most likely the reason why he was murdered. Now, there has been evidence clearly pointing to Marian Kočner, a well-known oligarch in Slovakia, commissioning the murder of Ján Kuciak precisely because Kuciak was investigating his involvement in large-scale corruption and possibly even his affiliations to high-ranking politicians of the governing Smer party, maybe even. And so that has been the supposition from the start. But the Senate, the three-judge Senate composed of judges who tried the case for the first time, acquitted Kočner and only convicted Alena Žužová, his associate, as the main commissioner of the murder. Now, the Supreme Court is now claiming that the first instance court completely omitted a series of evidence that might eventually lead to Kočner and probably even other people being convicted as well. It's not even the first time that the Supreme Court has struck down the decision of the lower courts. In 2023, there was a first decision of the Supreme Court saying the very same thing, that is that the court has neglected a series of potentially really important evidence. But still, even after this first decision of the Supreme Court, the lower courts went ahead and again only used a selected number of pieces of evidence. So now the Supreme Court has said for the second time, look, you haven't still considered a potentially really crucial evidence. And as a result of that, because we've said it already once before, they have stripped the current three judges panel of the dossier and gave it to a completely new panel, which will decide again on the whole case.
So it does look like we have some tricky situation when it comes to judicial independence within Slovakia, as well as, like you mentioned earlier, Fico's a very strong tendency towards Russia, as well as the electorate as well. Do you think that this is going to pose a question or pose a hurdle within the European Union unity in and of itself, seeing that its own members are facing with problems such as these, and also perhaps a disunity within how they want to go about dealing with Russia?
Look, I myself am mostly critical of the current developments in Slovakia, but in this particular case, I would say that this actually is a positive sign, and that is that judicial independence still exists, because no matter what happens in politics, no matter what the government of Robert Fico does in Slovakia that is undermining democracy and the rule of law potentially, the Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that lower courts have, have acted wrong, have done something wrong, and that in this particular case of neglected evidence. And just the mere fact that the Supreme Court, the highest court in the country, is forcing a retrial, which is going to happen and might potentially lead to a different outcome compared to the first decision, is a good sign. Yes, of course, the rule of law in Slovakia could be in danger, but now we're talking about a case that could potentially even point to the highest levels of either Slovak business or even potentially Slovak politics, because Kočner, the purported commissioner of the murder, or at least a very suspected one, did have connections to the highest levels of politics. And in spite of that, the trial is going ahead and is going to be retried at the order of the Supreme Court. So this is a good sign for Slovakia.
All right, thank you so much for your input and insight and helping us unpack all these very complicated issues. Really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.